Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, of course, made its debut in theaters last week as, the next installment of the MCU. I love the Ant-Man franchise.
Me too.
The first couple of films. Went into this one with a little bit of question about how well it'll be received by the general movie-going audience, but I myself personally quite excited about it. I did not love this movie. I did not love this movie. I wish I did, but I did not. I didn't hate it either. It definitely has some really good redeeming qualities. I thought Cassie, as a character, was a character I thought I was going to be really annoyed by, but I actually ended up liking the Cassie character quite a bit. There are some good grins and smiles in the movie, some great performance by Jonathan Majors, all that kind of stuff. But it opened to $104 million, which last week, a lot of people are trying to paint that as a really positive picture. And it is, if you compare it to the previous Ant-Man movies. I mean, it's doing this. It was the biggest opening for an Ant-Man film so far. But it didn't look as impressive when you compared it to other big comic book movies that have come out in the last year or so. As a matter of fact, the only one it really compared favorably to was Black Adam. And Morbius, if you want to say Morbius. But we all said the real question going into it is, what is the second weekend drop-off going to be like? And it was big. Nearly 70% big. As a matter of fact, Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania now holds the dubious distinction of being the single biggest second week box office drop-off in the history of the MCU, with, to be specific, a 96.7% drop. Now, that just barely beats out what was the previous record holder, which was Spider-Man No Way Home. Actually had a 90 or a 69% drop, which made Jonathan very happy for some reason earlier today. But it made him very, very happy. But of course, the big difference was that Spider-Man No Way Home had a monstrous opening weekend.
Right.
Right? Like a monstrous opening weekend, and went on to make $1.9 billion. Ant-Man and the Wasp had made 30 some, it still came in number one at the box office this weekend, but again, with 32 something million dollars that it made this weekend, again, marking the biggest drop off in the history of the MCU, which to me says a couple of things. Number one, that as I said, for its first opening weekend, I don't think they did a great job with their marketing campaign. I really don't. I think just the sheer, convolutedness of the multiverse being in like the quantum realm, and the trailers looked like a kind of gobbledygoopy CGI slobberfest. And again, I think we saw in the second weekend that except for those people like me who are excited to see a new MCU installment and rush out to the theater, the marketing has not done a great job of bringing average film goers to the theater. Secondly, it speaks to the lack of real word of mouth. Whereas the audience rating may be very good, the people saying they liked it aren't telling their friends they need to go see it. I mean, if they were, we wouldn't be seeing the single biggest drop off in MCU history of this thing. So I think it speaks a little bit to the marketing. I think it speaks a little bit to the word of mouth is not strong on this film. And it's really unfortunate. And I'll tell you what, Marvel, an executive from Marvel said, we're not concerned. We're not concerned about that box office results. They're lying. They're absolutely concerned. And I'll tell you the main reason they're absolutely concerned is because this is the movie that's supposed to be setting up the entire next phase with Kang. And people didn't want to go back to watch it again, and they didn't tell their friends to go watch it. Now, Marvel and executives from Marvel should absolutely anonymously be telling news outlets, we're not concerned about this. Of course you're supposed to say that, and I don't blame them for saying it at all. But make no mistake, they are very worried about this. They're fools if they don't. Now look, do not misinterpret this as the sky is falling on the MCU, all is lost. No, not at all. But this is a problem. And this is a concern. The MCU has never had a response to their movies like this. Even Thor: Love and Thunder, a lot of the average we talked about this a lot of the average movie-going audience had a really good time with the movie. Chris points out a lot that they did go and tell their friends to go back and watch it again. And it didn't have as bad as second weekend drop-off, ended up making over $700 million, all that kind of stuff. Now, whether or not you feel it deserved that, that's another topic altogether. But they didn't do it for Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania. And I'm going to go one step further in this. We talked a little bit earlier about how it's not comic book movie fatigue. It's mediocre fatigue. That's the problem. And you know how I'm always saying in the world of comic book movies, a rising tide raises all ships, right? Like there's a reason why Kevin Feige cheers for DC movies to be good. Because if the movie-going audience goes to a movie, has a great time at a comic book movie, they are more likely to go back to the next big comic book movie because the average movie-going audience member doesn't really care if something's DC or Marvel. What's been happening? Other than the Batman, you know, we've had okay at best movies. We had Doctor Strange: The Multiverse of Madness, which I like. I like Doctor Strange: Multiverse of Madness, but it's not as good as the MCU standard. We had Thor: Love and Thunder, which again, I enjoyed to a degree, but at best it's okay. You had Black Adam come out, underwhelmed a lot of people. People didn't want to go see it. Then now we have Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, which is again, I mean, at best it's okay. So, I mean, I will go so far as to say this, it's not just bad news for Marvel. James Gunn is looking at this too and is very concerned. This isn't good for DC either. This isn't good for anybody involved in the comic book movie realm. And again, this is not an issue that it's comic book movie fatigue, as the way Chris phrased it earlier, it's mediocrity fatigue. And damn, they need Guardians to be great. They need Guardians to be great because this is a very concerning trend for them right now. And look, I'll just say it. This is a horrible second weekend for Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania. Just horrible. If this movie had made $240 million in its opening weekend, I'd look at a 96.7% drop and say, well, everybody went to go see it opening. But they didn't all go to see it opening weekend. This is bad. Not the sky isn't falling. It's not all doom and gloom. It's not, oh, Marvel is done for it. No. But it is bad.
Guys, we want to thank a sponsor of this video, Rocket Money. The average person has around 12 paid subscriptions. Think about that. If you think you're only subscribed to a handful of services, you might want to double check. With Rocket Money, you can quickly identify and cancel all of your unwanted subscriptions. Rocket Money, formerly known as Truebill, is a personal finance app that finds and cancels your unwanted subscriptions, monitor your spending, and helps you lower your bills all in one place. Rocket Money will quickly and easily identify your subscriptions for you so you can stop paying for the ones you don't want and don't even use. Simply find the subscription you don't want and press cancel, and Rocket Money will cancel it for you. No more long hold times with customer service or tedious emailing back and forth. Rocket Money makes canceling subscriptions as easy as the click of a button. My wife Ann and I moved out of Burbank 2 years ago, and one of the first things I discovered when I loaded up Rocket Money was that I was still paying for a gym membership I haven't even been to in Burbank in 2 years. So stop throwing away your money. Cancel unwanted subscriptions and manage your expenses the easy way by going to rocketmoney.com/Campea. That's rocketmoney.com/Campea. rocketmoney.com/Campea.
Anyway, Rob, what was your first reaction? Because I know last week when we talked about, you know, over or under a 58% drop, you thought it might take a less than 68% or 58% drop, something like that. I think a lot of people felt that way too. But when you see this number, what's your first reaction? What do you attribute it to?
Well, I've seen this movie twice now. And watching it, because I didn't like it the first time, and you know, I like to go back and see a movie a second time a lot of the time so I can just sit back and take it all in. I think there's a couple of problems with this movie. They were assuming that Kang carried more weight with an audience that doesn't know who Kang is than he does.
Right.
Because nobody knows who he is. So even in the marketing, they showed Jonathan Majors, who was great.
Oh, yeah, terrific performance.
He's great as Kang. But you look at it, if you don't know who Kang is, and he comes out, they assume that you already know that he's this great, powerful villain. And they do set him up as being villainous in this. But then the average moviegoer is kind of left with, can I spoil? I mean, let me just say that he's not the overwhelming villain that you might think he would be. That was another thing. You know, I was kind of, as I walked out of it, also Ant-Man. This is such an atypical movie. They've taken their least grossing film franchise, which is the Ant-Man franchise. He's not a heavy hitter. He's your everyman who gets the suit, you know, and they've put him into this fantasy context, this overblown sci-fi world with all these characters and freedom fighters and everything. But it's still Ant-Man. And I couldn't help, as I was watching it the second time, feeling this feels out of place. Like the Scott Lang character, I get it. He was locked in the quantum realm. He came out of it. He got the Avengers in Endgame and gave them a way to defeat Thanos. But this movie felt off to me. And when I was watching it, the joys that I would get from the Ant-Man franchise, because like you, I really liked the first two Ant-Man movies, they weren't really in this movie. They turned it into something else. And of all the characters, I understand they had to use the quantum realm. I get that. It just felt out of place to me. And when you go see it, you're watching a movie that's trying to be this thing that we like, big epic sci-fi, action adventure, evil villain bank. And then you've got this character that doesn't really belong in that kind of a movie. So I think the reason that it didn't work as well as they had hoped is that people were unsatisfied with it on both counts. It wasn't as fun an Ant-Man movie as we've seen previously. And two, the other side, being this epic sci-fi saga of battling this villain, that was underwhelming as well. So collectively, you don't have the kind of experience that you hoped to get from either one of those kinds of movies. That's just a theory, but that's how I felt seeing it the second time, because I was looking for that.
Chris, I mean, we saw the numbers come out. We saw the box office results. It basically takes a 70% drop, which is not something we have ever seen out of an MCU film without having a staggering first weekend success. What was your first reaction to seeing the drop that they had? And kind of now as we do the autopsy on it here, what do you attribute that kind of a drop to?
I mean, my first reaction was, ooh, I was very wrong about this, because I was optimistic pre-seeing this movie of, I don't think it'll have a huge drop-off. I think it'll have a reasonable one. Ooh, yikes. I think to Rob's point, it didn't deliver on any of the things we wanted or expected. And obviously, we talk a lot on this show about how you should leave expectations at the door, go into something, completely open. But the third film in a franchise, there are some expectations that you can't leave behind. How your characters behave, the kind of situations they're in. There are those kind of standards. And I would like to say standard instead of expectation. And it didn't meet those for me. I think a lot of people, too, the word of mouth on this one, I went into it seeing this mostly because I needed to for this job. But so many people told me, I don't think you're going to like it. I don't think you're going to have a good time. And that's not what you want to be having around the water cooler. You want people to be excited and telling people to go see your movies and everything, right? And most people have been saying, this one's just not really good. It's just pretty meh. There's some fun moments, but for the most part, it doesn't really deliver. And I just think so many people heard that and went, again, I don't really want to sit in a movie theater and spend all this time in there and spend all this money in there if it's just going to be eh.
Yeah. And look, I know I've been going off a lot lately about how I don't think Phase 4 was an utter disaster for Marvel. It was just weaker than everything else they've done. Look, to me, and I remember I was talking to Ann about this just the other day, Kevin Feige has got to find a way to get more directly in control of these movies again. Because ever since he started taking a step back and delegating more, and like there were some movies like Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness, he literally said he was completely hands off. Like probably approved some dailies and things like that, but he said, he was pretty much hands off. That he needs to get more involved again. And I think that's part of the reason why we had the announcement from Disney a few weeks ago, or just last week, that they're going to start scaling back a bit. They're going to start reducing that ridiculous, huge flood of content that they've been pouring out, both on Disney Plus and theatrically, and they're going to take a step back. They're going to start to space it out a little bit more. I don't think we're going to go back to the days of 1 or 2 projects a year, but between the theatrical releases and Disney Plus and all that kind of stuff, you can't be putting out 6 or 7 things a year. You just can't maintain that kind of a pace. So again, but I said it before, I will say it again. In as much as the magic seems to be gone, it can come back real fast. I mean, if James Gunn knocks us out of the park with Guardians 3 and it turns out to be even 80% as good as it looks, then all of a sudden, all the enthusiasm is back. It's funny, winning cures everything. But the guys' question is for you. What is your reaction to this, seeing that Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, despite the fact that they're introducing their next big bad in Kang, has taken the biggest second weekend drop off in Marvel history, despite the fact that it didn't have a massive opening weekend. What do you attribute it to? Is it really just a blip on the radar, nothing to be concerned about? Is it something they should be concerned about? Is it that the sky is falling kind of scenario? I don't think it is, but whatever you guys think, jump down into the comment section below and let us know your thoughts.